I want to thank you first for making yourself available. And our objective with this presentation is to provide you with an open house illustration of the International Data Center. We will highlight the development of the IDC over 26 years. Where is the presentation? So while waiting for the presentation, I wanted to show the table of contents that it's still not ready. Okay, as indicated in the table of contents, we will begin with the role of the IDC in the CTBT verification of compliance. We will touch on the contribution of the third technical test by the group of scientific experts to the construction of the IDC, and show you our internal functionality and status of development toward the commissioning. This slide is giving an overview of the paragraphs of the CTBT Protocol Part 1, where the roles of the IDC are defined. To summarize, we will say that the main role of the IDC is to make analysis of IMS data, both automatically and manually, on behalf of states, and provide the resulting products for them to use it for verification of compliance with the CTBT. The framework includes more objectives such as provision of raw data and services to states. The draft operational manual for the IDC defines the processing, the products, and the services of the IDC, and the technical specifications of the stations and radionuclide laboratories are specified in the IMS operational manual. Okay. Before the treaty was open to signature and the negotiations were ongoing in Geneva, the design of the IMS and the prototype IDC, PIDC, was being conducted by the group of scientific experts, the GSE, as it was called, carried out 3 large-scale technical tests. The first 2 concentrated in the design of the IMS, and the last aimed to develop the IDC. The development of the PIDC was done in Arlington, Virginia, and operated between 1997 and 2000, making a process to transfer of operational environment to the IDC in Vienna. The organogram of the IDC as it is today, it includes the Office of the Director and 5 sections. And they are divided into units. The Office of the Director is supported by the Quality Management and Data Fusion Unit and Planning, Program and Budget Implementation Unit. We also have an Information Security Manager. IDC accounts for 30% of the PTS personnel and about 50% of the CTBTO budget. It is, the division is operational 24/7, and the key personnel from several units are on emergency call. So the Ops Operations section, called Ops, is performing the operation of the IMS and the GCI. This contributes to the provision of timely available IMS data for continuous automatic processing and monitoring of the work. The automatic processing system apps section provides an efficient computer-based environment for all IDC automatic and manual operations, including development and services to states. The MDA, Monitoring and Data Analysis section, is divided into two large groups. One is performing the manual analysis of the seismoacoustic automatic bulletins, and the other is taking care of the automatic radionuclide reports. The reviewed event bulletin, REBs, and the reviewed radionuclide report, RRRs, are the assessment of the IDC on seismoacoustic events and radioactivity detections. Software application section makes possible the development and operationalization of the IDC software, which includes automatic and interactive IMS data processing and dissemination of both the data and products. It also maintains and develops software for the National Data Center. The capacity building and training section runs a strong training and outreach program. The work includes trainings for station operators, NDCs, organizing technical meetings, services to states, signatories, and the participant services, like now with this SnT2023. This slide shows the IDC operational pipeline, which include both the SHI and RN data processing schemes. Here you can see the timelines that all IDC products are released. The products are defined in the draft IDC operational manual. It is important to note that the automatic products are already meeting the timelines for entry into force of the CTBT, while the reviewed products, REB and RRR, are following the provisional operations. In this slide, we can see the outcome of the work of the IDC, the production of bulletins and reports, which reflects the global monitoring. In the last 23 years, the IDC has released nearly 1 million reviewed seismoacoustic events and 500,000 reviewed radionuclide reports. You can see that IDC frequently detect other natural or non-natural events that are not nuclear explosions, like Beirut explosion, earthquake in Turkey, Syria, and Fukushima. The IDC detected all 6 announced nuclear tests by the Democratic Republic of North Korea. This is a summary of the detections, where you can see how the progress made in the construction of the IMS network has reduced the size of the confidence area. This is the area targeted by on-site inspection, from 880 kilometers square in 2006 with 22 stations to 109 kilometers square in 2017, where 125 stations were used. A comparison of the size of the events are reflected in the seismograms recorded in an IMS station located in South Korea. It is important to note that the progress of the IMS station and the IDC methods has improved substantially the uncertainty of the location of the events. Coming now to data sharing for civil and scientific applications, I will talk about the tsunami warning centers. Here there is a need to have first an agreement with UNESCO and the authorization of the preparatory commission. Then the CTBTO will provide data to tsunami warning centers. The IDC sends over 4 terabytes of IMS data per year to these centers, which correspond to over 150 stations worldwide. The second possibility is VDEC contract. Institutions like universities and research laboratories can establish a contract with no cost to get data and products for scientific purposes. Let's now have a look on the IDC Progressive Commissioning Plan. We have 7 phases in total, and in this slide we can see the actual status. We are currently in phase 5B. This year we conducted the 2023 experiment where some components of the system were tested, and we plan to have 2 more experiments in the next coming years. With this, we expect to be prepared to full-scale testing of the IDC hardware and software to complete phase 5. I will conclude with some simple but important points about the status of the development of the IDC in the last 26 years. The IMS has reached some 90% completion. IDC detected all 6 announced nuclear tests made by DPRK. Both IMS data and IDC products are being continuously recorded and produced respectively. The data and products are being also used for scientific and civil purpose, and significant challenges have been addressed and will be addressed in the future as part of the IDC commissioning. The milestones are requirement-based and it's not time-bound. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Zeinabou. Now we have time for some questions. For those of you who are following us online, you can post questions and they will appear on the screen beside me. You may have seen me checking the screen every now and again. I wouldn't want anyone to think I was following the cricket. I was actually looking for questions. We have none there yet, but I did see a hand go up here in the room here. Bob, if you just wait for a second till the microphone gets with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the talk. It's good to look back at the history occasionally and sort of reflect. And I remember that when the IDC was being set up, there was a school of thought that said, as far as the seismic technology was concerned, it would not be long before we wouldn't need analysts, and that the software was getting so good that it could all be done automatically. And I was just thinking, it doesn't seem as though we are much closer to that ideal now than we were 26 years ago. But I wonder whether you had any thought on that.
Yes, so I think that there are many discussions going on in the experts' meetings about this automatic analysis, and we have also the re-engineering of the IDC going on. I cannot tell you here exactly what is the status, but you know, with the development of the technology, with the new concepts coming in, yes, I can tell you that there are a lot of discussions and proposals going on, and I think software application is the one scientific method taking care of this. Okay.
Thank you. If I can just add a personal note to that as well. The human analysts are really hard to beat. The skills that those analysts have are never cease to amaze me. And if you try to write an automatic algorithm that can replicate what they can do, you are setting yourself a really hard target. Those people are astonishing. So yeah, people talk about replacing human beings a lot in the press at the moment with automatic algorithms, but you are heading for a very hard target there. Thanks for the question, Bob. Another question here?
Sitting aside of the analyst.
There's a good one.
Sitting aside of the analyst, I can say that, okay, so far, in the meantime, we have the software that we are using. It is well-known RS. Good. But back into that also, that I think that we have something that is going on, that's tested. It's the net visa. We have that. We started to work on that closely with SA, and we hope that using the net visa, we are not going to miss any event or to add extra events, because this is the goal of the role of the analyst. But in the top of that, I think that we need the contribution of analysts anywhere. Why I say that? We increased the number of stations since the beginning of the treaty. And consequently, we have increased also the number of the data that are available. At the beginning, remember, Bob, that there is no infrasound anymore, hydroacoustic, seismic. Now we are dealing with infrasound also on that. And the number of analysts remain the same.
They remain the same.
Looking at state signatories.
Yes, so challenges are many. I did not want to start with net visa, just not to take it to artificial intelligence and all these things. So let us stop here with this question. And there is always room. We are here for SnT to discuss with the analysts, with scientific methods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I think it's time for us to move on to the next presentation. So if you join me again, thank you, Zeinabou, for the presentation. And our next presenter is Pierrick, excuse me, and he's going to talk to us about infrasound technology, which I know he knows a lot about because I used to work in the office next to him, and I had some very, very happy memories of him coming in and showing me infrasound signals as they arrived on the stations after a bolide over Russia. So over to you, Pierrick.
Thank you very much, Mark. So thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to be back at the SnT. I think you heard me a bit already, too much already today, but I will try to keep it short. If you've been at SnT 2021, I told you a very long story about infrasound technology at the IDC. And today what I will try to do is to give you a shorter story about what we've been doing at the IDC with this technology over the last 20-something years, but with a status update for the last few months. And so my objective is just to quickly bring you through what actually was the objective, what we achieved over the years, and what we achieved recently in the last few months or so. So this talk is really not my work, it's more the work of the PTS colleagues and the IDC colleagues that have contributed to this. We are talking about the IDC analysts. That's a big part of the result of what I will be showing today at some point. But I think I can already tell you that the outline of the presentation will be really to go back in time quickly to see where we started, what we have achieved because for a long, long time, even though the IDC was already working and operational, we did not have infrasound data that were used for interactive review and analysis. And at some point, we reached this maturity, so where we could actually do this. We could actually show to the member states, the national data centers, what we were making, how we are using the data from the IMS stations to produce detections, events. And we continue to work from there to improve the system, which I will hopefully demonstrate to you at some point. I'm just waiting another second. I see that there's a lot of work in the back. I can do the whole talk only talking without slides. You will have to imagine how it looks like. Okay, so where it started? In 1998, at the prototype IDC, we had just a couple of stations that were not IMS stations, and we had a bit of there were a little bit of work being done at the time with the detector being deployed at the prototype IDC that were then delivered to the International Data Center in Vienna. Then the first station came online, the first IMS station came online, and that's when we realized we have data from this IMS station, we have methods that have been proven to work for seismic technology, that have been adapted for infrasound, but they may not work that well. So I will pause, wrap up, and come back to this point in a minute. It's just a teaser. So where we were in 2000, that's what I was trying to, where I was leading. So in 2000, we were having the IDC bulletin. So we had data coming from all the IMS stations that were online at the time. In 2000, there was no infrasound station online coming in. So we started with these bulletins. At some point, we had IDC infrasound data that came in. Over the years, in these past 23 years or so, we have heard we have almost 1 million events that are in the bulletins. And when we talk about 1 million events, we are talking about 1 million interactively reviewed and approved events. It's a lot of data. If you look at this map, you see that most of the detections, most of the events are coming from well-known origins, meaning natural seismicity, but there's a few points that are outside of these regions. And some of these viewpoints, they are linked to the actual infrasound bulletins. So this is a map that I've been updating regularly over the past few years. And in 2010, so here on the left you have 2000, which was the beginning of the IDC review. 2010 was the beginning of the actual implementation of infrasound data into the bulletins. So in 2010, we started to work with the data we were receiving and putting them into our events. We have a map which is very, very different. If you look at both maps, they are very different, even though most of the events that are on the right side, they are also on the left map. It's just to tell you what are these on the right side, what are these events, what are they really about. It's event that contains at least one or several infrasound phases, meaning a lot of seismoacoustic events. If we have earthquake with ground coupling, we may have an event. If we have meteorite exploding in the atmosphere, we have a pure infrasound event potentially, volcanic eruptions, things like this. An event of interest, like the director was showing to you before, like the Beirut explosion in 2020, which generated a lot of acoustic wave traveling in the atmosphere. So we have a lot of data, a lot of events, a lot of information. How did we get there? The same kind of plot you've seen in the presentation before. We have data coming in from all the stations, the SHI stations. So maybe it's difficult for you to read in the room, but the green line is the infrasound technology. Red and yellow are seismic data, and the orange is hydroacoustic. And you see that everything is coming in, entering the databases of the IDC. We do a bit of quality control. We do the station processing, meaning we take station by station, we detect. Then we put this all together, and eventually we arrive to network processing. So what that was mentioned to you before, NetVisa, that's this network processing stage. We have two tools that are being used. And we have the automatic bulletin being generated with the legacy system, Global Association, but also the network processing bulletins being generated with NetVisa, which is then the input for the analyst work, the interactive review, which then is being saved into our reviewed event bulletins. And what I want to tell you is that in this, there are some of these results that are from infrasound technology. So, coming back to 2001, the story I was telling you earlier, in 2001, we had 60 plant stations. This is the 60 locations, but we only had 6 stations in green that were sending data. And they are very, very spread out. We have no close-by station. Very difficult to say, okay, detection in Madagascar. Is it related to the detection in Canada, for instance? Thousands of kilometers away, not enough knowledge in 2001 to know what to do. Anyway, my colleagues back then, they made it work. They processed everything, and then you got the picture on top right, which is the bulletins in 2004. And you see all of these dots are detections for just 1 month. And all the events for just 1 month. And you see that all the events, or majority of events, are coming from the oceans. So it's not something of interest to the IDC, not of interest to the CTBTO, because it was mostly natural events, microbiome activity, storms in the oceans. So we stopped it. in 2003, 2006, we disconnected everything from IDC operations. Development went online. And until 2010, we developed these technologies internally to make sure that we are ready to put it back in operation. I'm looking at the Bob Pierce because we discussed how we're doing this, how are the analysts able to ingest this information so that we can put it back in operation. So we had a hard target that we reached in February 2010, and then we put it back in operation. So 2010 was the beginning of infrasound analysis, and 2010 was when we had 40-something stations, 42, I think. So 2010 to 2014, normal operations. 2014, 2016, we are thinking, it's nice, but maybe we can do something different. Maybe we can do something better. Maybe we can give the tools we have at the IDC to the national data centers. So we had a re-engineering of the infrasound, which was a little bit earlier than the IDC re-engineering, where we, with our partner from France, we redeveloped one tool together, which was a new infrasound toolkit. It came online eventually in 2016, 2017. We gave it to the NDC in NDC in the box, but not yet in operation because we still had some work to do. We also work on this network processing for seismic, which was extended for infrasound, which was promising very interesting results because we were able to get rid of the clutter from the oceans, from the local activity at the stations and so on. So it was really promising. And in addition to this, we also started to do more training. At least we started to really do infrasound dedicated training thanks to the NDC in the box tools. So a lot of training, a lot of developments, new methods and so on. For 10 years, that was a nice journey to bring it to what is the next era for infrasound technology. So what we have now, which is a 90% complete thanks to our colleague from the IMS and our colleague from the member states. So 53 stations are online sending data. We are a very global map of stations, but also a global catalog of events. And then we have this major eruption occurring in 2022, the Tonga eruption, which light up the whole network. The 53 stations recorded signal from this eruption, something that I personally was not expecting to see anytime, every station recording signal from the same source. And for this, I'm just putting a few things that you may have seen in the past. So we have antipodal detection in Tunisia, very complicated pattern of propagation. We have propagation over days and days, 6, 7, 8 days, with a wave going around the Earth several times in every direction. We have, Mark was mentioning the bolide of 2013 earlier. That was the biggest one in 2013. And here, if you see the lowest two lines on the right, that the bolide to scale compared to the eruption. And you see the bolide is almost a flat line compared to the eruption. It tells you how big this thing was, how big this eruption was. And there's a lot of work going on, and I will mention this at the very end when I finish. So 2021, 2022, we have a lot of things that are ready to be operational. We have a nice QC tools that is operational and being developed even more. The NetVisa method is ready for infrasound, ready to be rolled up completely in operations. And the big achievement, this is this re-engineering of the station processing that is now fully in operation. So what the NDCs were using for a couple of years, now we have it also at the IDC, a newer version, faster, answering our needs, connected to our system, which is a little bit of a complicated system. So bottom line, 1st of July 2022, the results we produce, you can reproduce exactly the same if you have NDC in the box and if you have access to the data. So we are transparent on the infrasound side. You can produce the same event we are producing, the same detection, the same parameters. And I think I'm not too far off. The last thing I want to mention, something very, very important for me as an infrasound expert at the PTS, it's civil and scientific application. So I was mentioning the volcanic eruption. We've been mentioning bolides earlier. Another big bolide of 2022, which was picked up by 20 infrasound stations offshore Namibia. And I mention it because 20 stations for the infrasound network, that's a lot of stations. We are used to 2, 3 stations for the IMS, contributing, seeing the same kind of detection for an event. 20 is kind of unusual. So it's good to see that there are big events because they help us to calibrate even more our detection pattern, our analysis, our event association, and so on. And these events, luckily, there's not atmospheric tests, but at least we have this kind of natural event that are helping us to make sure that we are doing a good job and everything is working quite well. So I don't know if I'm good with time, but I will come to the conclusion. Thank you. I will come to the conclusion, which is basically we made with our colleague from the IDC and from the PTS, we made a big journey from having no data when we started the work of the IDC and the AMS to having a lot of data. We started with tools that were not adequate, that were not prepared for what we were supposed to do, which was automatic analysis, interactive processing, providing information to the member states and giving them the tools to do the same. Now we are there thanks to NDC in the box, thanks to these new developments. We also have network modeling capabilities thanks to our partners in the US, and I invite you to see a poster on this because I don't have time to talk about it. So during session 4.1, you have the number here on the screen. Training activities are resuming, portable array campaigns are resuming as well, so that we can also assist member states, but know a bit more. I've been asked a lot, so I'll just put it on this slide. ITW will have a new workshop in 2024. We'll work on it. And the last message is, I didn't have time to talk about Unga eruption, so please come to see the whole session of 1.4, and please come see the panel tomorrow afternoon, because there will be a very interesting invited talk, but also a very interesting panel discussion with a lot of experts, and I think it's going to be very interesting for multiple reasons, not infrasound only, but multi-phenomenon reasons. And with this, thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have time for some questions. I see none online. Do we have any questions in the room? Well, I see no raised hands, and I always take a selfish pleasure when I see that and I'm chairing a session because it allows me to ask my question. One of the things which I've always thought is one of the great challenges for infrasound is the fact that it literally depends on which way the wind blows. Could you talk a little about that?
So I can already tell you something simple, which is if you go to the session 1.1, you will see a lot of stories about this problem of wind propagation, of characterization, and classification of detection, and so on. This is a big problem for the infrasound, as you know, at least you can imagine. The atmosphere is moving. Last week it was pretty cold cooler in Vienna. Now it's very warm. That's an issue we have as well for the infrasound propagation, where the weather is changing, not only at the ground, but also in the altitude, where the weather propagating at very large distances. Luckily, there's a season that are making things a little bit stable, but there's also a lot of instability. So it's making our life very complex. What we are doing with our system is that we do not take this into account per se. We have a very empirical way of doing things, but captures a good picture of what is actually the state of infrasound propagation analysis for event building. And for event characterization, then we can go a little bit deeper, and the community is working really hard on this. In the afternoon, you have a panel about modeling capabilities. You will hear Roger Wackler, which will be talking about this as well. And you will have a lot of presentation and posters during session 1.1 and 1.4 where you have examples of this. So it's a big challenge, but the community is taking it as a group. And I think it will be the next 10 years of the IDC to bring this into consideration. How do we integrate atmospheric data, methodology into our automatic system and automatic processing?
Thank you. And we should move on to the next paper now. Oh, we have a question back, yes.
Sorry, yeah. It work? Yeah. Just a quick question about what you just said. Is there like approaches like template matching could work with this kind of signal, or as you said, it's too heterogeneous due to the atmosphere, and then you can't determine some patterns and look for this type of pattern?
So I heard template matching. So I guess you're saying correlating events from one to the other? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a group, I think a group of colleagues from the UK. A few years ago, they used a sequence of explosions that were close in time to do this kind of template matching. It worked quite well. But then there is this temporal resolution that is a big problem. So if you work at a small scale, minutes, couple of hours maybe, that works quite well. If you do not look too deep into the signal characteristic, it will also work okay, but you need to have a lot of information. If you want really to do this day by day over a long period of time, it is much more complicated. I am not aware of a technique that is working currently. Plus you have this additional challenge that day and night, even if it's coming from the same place, the signal may have been distorted in such a way that you will not be able to compare them. So the error rate might be much larger, so you might need to find some new ways to do this a little bit more intelligently, at least a bit differently than what you would do for seismic, for instance, where it is much more stable.
Thank you very much. And now we should really move on to the next paper. We may have some time for questions at the end, but in the meantime, I'll introduce another colleague, Yacine. He's going to talk to us about calibration of infrasound stations. And calibration was an issue that was touched on yesterday in the Executive Secretary's speech, when he was talking about the needs for standards and the usefulness of standards for comparing things. So I look very, very much forward to this one. Over to you, Yacine.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me all well. Thank you for this introduction. I'm Yacine. I'm working in the IMS division, and basically my role is to make sure that the infrasound station provide the data with the best quality as possible. So when received at the IDC, the automatic processing, the work from the analysts, and so on is done at best. All right. And of course, this is a presentation, and this is a work that is done with many of my colleagues. Okay, so I will not detail too much this slide, but the idea was just to illustrate that the on-site calibration of infrasound station is part of a wider quality of infrastructure that involves other quality processes. The operational manual for infrasound station states strict requirements on calibration, and some of them being that, of course, an infrasound station needs to have means to carry out a calibration. Then previous, the on-site calibration that are performed year after year, there is an initial calibration that is made, and this is a time where we define a baseline, so a sensitivity and a response for each channel, for each measurement systems. And that then, year after year, we'll check the stability of the measurement system and verify if each of them remains within the expected tolerances. If not, a maintenance action is triggered. And this is done at least on a yearly basis and over the IMS passband. So now, what are we using for this on-site calibration? So the principal use is a side-by-side comparison. It's a passive calibration method that is described by Gabrielson that was chosen. And we have here on the picture the illustration of an infrasound array where we zoom in on one of the sites. And if you see the black square, which represent the volts, we have inside a reference system, so reference sensor with a reference inlet port. And the idea is that for each of the sites, we have a reference system that is permanently installed. And instead, for such stations where infrasound capability is installed, we have not only the operational channels that is forwarded to the IDC, but also the reference channel. And in practice, this means that on a continuous basis, we have automatic computation of calibration results at the IDC coming from all the sites, from all the stations where calibration capability has been installed. And this computation of calibration results is performed through a software that was developed in-house, and that is called CalExpire. In terms of process, so the scheduled calibration process can be summarized in 4 steps. So a planning step, 4 phases. So the first phase consists in making sure that there is no obstacle for the calibration to be performed in the upcoming year. And this is usually the occasion where we gather all the meaningful information that will be helpful for us to interpret the calibration results. Implementation is something that is fairly easy because it's now made completely automatic. And then There is the review from PTS officers and the publication of results whenever this is considered to be the good moment. And during the review phase, of course, this is the moment where any kind of anomaly is checked and where maintenance action may be triggered. Here is a timeline of the deployment of calibration capabilities that is still ongoing, of course, but that was implemented in the past years. And we can see mainly that we progress at a rate of 2-3 stations per year, with a year 2019 that was extremely productive. And then year 2020, 2021, of course, where we faced COVID restrictions. So now in terms of results, we can say that we have now a third of the IS network that is equipped with calibration capabilities. So this represents 17 stations and almost 130 channels. And we have a fourth of these stations for which the results are officially reported to member states. And basically the discrepancy between this third and fourth is the time needed to define the baseline before reporting officially results as being results of the scheduled calibration. So now I wanted to show a couple of slides to give you an impression of what the PTS officers have access to when reviewing calibration results. And this is, for example, a typical plot where we can see the responses in amplitude and phase for a station for all the sites being overplotted. And this gives, in a glance, a fairly good impression on the behavior of the systems. And this is where we typically would spot easily any outliers. Then going further into details, we can, for each of the stations, access further information, such as a sensitivity tracker for a reference calibration period, average sensitivity, average response, number of coherent windows associated to this computation. We can select time. We can also produce a standardized IMS 2.0 message. And all of this helped us to spot unexpected sensitivities and unexpected responses over time, and allowed us to identify IDC misconfigurations, instrument changes without configuration updates, and also sensitivity shifts at specific pressure levels. And of course, this was the first step to solve of these issues that were identified. There was another point that was also very interesting. It was also giving lots of information on how we could have integration issues at some of the sites, and following some data analysis, we optimized the way we installed these reference systems. So by changing some inlet port locations, for example, of the reference systems, and also by using 2 reference inlet ports in places where the wind noise reduction system design did not allow for a primary manifold. A couple of real examples that we have fixed. So these are from last year. So this sensitivity shift that could be observed in the tracker actually reflected an inversion between the operational and reference system following a maintenance activity on site. So this is something that we could catch. We could also catch the fact that the reference sensor had some data quality issues in the low frequencies. So this was solved by replacing this sensor. And very lately, we have also solved this issue. We have noticed a 6 Hertz high resonance peak, and this was correlated with the flooding that occurred at the site. And last week, although the week before, we have finally been able to empty the water that was being kept in the pipe. So going further with data quality control, because the software tool offers much more other much more possibilities actually. We can use the tracker at any kind of frequencies we would like to, fine-tuning the time periods. We can observe sensitivities as a function of environmental dependency, so absolute pressure or temperature. And we have also a set of pre-computed plots that are made available to PTS reviewers, and this has been proved to be very useful to troubleshoot any kind of issue. And the software also allows to refine the responses, taking into account specific algorithms. For example, if you want to filter out low spectral data with low spectral levels. Now, if we step back just a little, I found it very interesting that in 2011 there were nothing, basically, not even an approach, a method, in order to perform calibration on site of the full measurement system. And now, something like 10 years after, we have a third of the IMS infrasound network that is compliant with calibration, and we are just waiting in a way the rollout for the whole network to be compliant. So today's scheduled calibration process is operational at the PTS, and it's definitely a success. So it's not only that requirements are met now, it's that issues are identified and are resolved thanks to this process and the tools that is supporting this process. And last but not least, we have also had the opportunity to validate the fact that most of the channels have a very stable response over the years, which of course reassured the current PTS installation practices that were set up over the last years. So now what's next? So as I mentioned, the first thing is to continue rolling out the calibration capability in the infrasound network. And of course, with that is fine-tuning the software with features that are supporting advanced data QC. And also, and maybe it's one of the most important things, is that now that we have passive and continuous calibration, we are basically having a goldmine of data that keeps increasing. And the question that remains is, how can we get even more out of this data set? So for example, we can think of improving the stability of the system sensitivity through volt design or many other things. But basically, if anybody has any suggestion, I think that there is room for creativity here. And just before ending this presentation, I would like to advertise the fact that if you want to know more either about the calibration process or the software tool, there are e-posters that are related to it. And something that is not written here is that all this approach is part of a wider approach in terms of quality infrastructure. First slide was mentioning several blocks. And I believe that if you want to know more about how the idea came and what led to this actual work, you might be interested to be part of the panel discussion on metrology that will occur today at 4. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Do you have any questions from the room? If not, I'll indulge myself again. The examples that you showed of systems going out of calibration were what you might call discrete events. There was flooding, there was somebody connecting the wrong plug into the wrong hole. Are there factors that are going to cause a more gradual creep of the sensors out of calibration?
So this is something that I have not personally observed, or not yet. Mm-hmm. One thing I'd like to say is that this technique approach, it is fairly new. So I mean, one might expect that a new type of issues may arise, be visible, identified, and that the log of issues and how is the impact of the signature in the data to relate to might increase. But I have to say that we have not caught any kind of things yet. However, what I can say is that today I'm with this process and the tools, I'm confident enough that this can be visible in a fairly easy way. Because what is very specific with this technique is that it's continuous. So when you have this gold mine of data, actually it makes it very hard to overlook an issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Very reassuring that you haven't seen it in a sense. We have a question here.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. Well, it's clear that the calibration process is to verify that the stations is operating under the expected configuration and quality control. But how about your sparring strategy? Because we have the stations segregated all over the world, and calibration may be it may be telling us, okay, there's a need to change this or that in the station. So I don't believe you have full depot tree, like deployment of complete station at the site or at the operators, but it will be very nice to know a little bit on your sparring strategy.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, having a sparring strategy is really one of the key elements that makes you very robust and resilient to station downtime or data quality issues. I would say that on-site calibration is one of the many aspects or one of the many data quality control mechanisms we have to keep any site of any stations working at its best. It's certainly not the only mechanism that needs to be followed. There are many other quality indicators that are worth checking in parallel. And of course, there are other technical and also non-technical mechanisms that need to be implemented to, whenever an issue has been identified, to correct it as fast as possible. The example I can give you is this resonance that I was showing earlier. This has been identified in a very remote place, and once, if it were, for example, a defective sensor that would need replacement, not having a spare would have been, if not dramatic, a pity, because you just lose time because of bad planning, I would say.
Okay. Any other questions? In which case, I'd like to thank our presenters again. Thank you for your attendance, and let's have lunch. Thank you.